Hi, I'm Joanne. I'm the manager curator at the Dartmouth Heritage Museum, and today we are in the program support building where I'm going to tell you the story of the babes in the woods. What I really love about museums is the stories that they tell. And as I was kind of searching around the warehouse, I come across this monument of two little girls kind of wrapped up against each other, and a little tag that mentioned the story of the babes in the woods. So of course I had to investigate a little bit further. It's a tragic tale, happened between Topsail Lake and Lake Loon in Preston County, today part of the Halifax Regional Municipality. Happened in 1842. April 11th is the beginning of our tale. Tale starts at the Mara farm, where John and his wife Jane were raising their children. Now, John had been stricken by a case of the measles and was bedbound, couldn't go to work. His wife was confined to her room. She had just had a baby and was looking after that newborn baby. That left 11-year-old daughter to look after the household. She was busy in the house looking after chores and kitchen duties. The two younger daughters, Jane Elizabeth and Margaret. Jane Elizabeth was about 6 and Margaret was 4 years old. They were left to their own devices and decided to go out for an afternoon of berry picking. Now this was a beautiful summer day in April, warm weather, just a beautiful day to be out. So they decided to go pick some berries. And no one really noticed that anything was amiss until it got towards supper time and the children had not returned. The father had requested the hired hand go and take a look around for them. Well, the hired hand goes and looks around, doesn't hear them, doesn't really see them, but he's pretty confident that they're going to return anytime now. The sun's going to set. They're going to find their way home. Well, sunset approaches. There's no sign of the girls. The father gets up from his sick bed. He's worried. He goes and searches for those girls, crying out, alerting all the neighbors. No sign of them. They search all night long and come up with nothing. The next day, it's Tuesday, overnight about 2 inches of snow had fallen. Remember, we're in April and the weather can change pretty quickly. Father John continued his search around the countryside, around their home. About the front portion of his property, his little farm had been cleared, but the back out onto scraggy wilderness, swamps and whatnot. On Tuesday, they came across a neighbor on the Brown homestead. This neighbor had been out chopping wood the night before and had heard what he thought were the cries of young children. The neighbor said that he went out and tried to get their attention, called for these children, but no sound was heard, and fearing that they might have actually been wild animals, sometimes wild animals can sound a lot like crying children to try and attract prey. So he went back inside, fearful that it was in fact wild animals. Tuesday, no luck finding the girls. Wednesday comes around and they find tracks in the snow. By this time, hundreds of people had come around to help in the search. Messages had gone out to Halifax and to Dartmouth, nearby communities, and people came in droves to help search for these two young girls, 6-year-old Jane Elizabeth and 4-year-old Margaret. So the search continues, and on Wednesday they see footprints, but that's it. The snow was quickly melting. They couldn't find any more sign of the girls. Thursday and Friday roll around, and they did find a scrap of clothing. They found a scrap of cotton from a dress. It had blood on it, so they were pretty concerned at this point. Not only because the dress was bloody, but the temperatures had dropped quite a bit. These are two young girls who had gone out on a very sunny day, very warm day. They were dressed in simple cotton frocks, no hats, no overcoats, nothing like that. And the shoes that the girls were wearing were quite torn. The mother recounted that the older daughter's shoes had a big hole in the toe, and her big toe stuck out quite prominently. So they were very concerned about the elements affecting the children. They tried to follow the tracks that they had found to no avail. They had footprints, they had this cotton dress. They knew that the girls were out there somewhere, but there was no sign of them. The Saturday morning Post, the Halifax Morning Post, came out and called for any able-bodied person to come out and help in the search, to come on to the 9:30 ferry in Dartmouth, and then they would be led to the searching place around the Marr Farm. 3,000 people came out. Now, the funny thing about traveling on a Sunday, this is a time when the ferry service, you can only get on the ferry on a Sunday if you were going to church. The ferryman would ask you, are you going to church across the harbor? And that was the only way you were permitted to travel. So to gather folks on a Sunday for a non-religious reason, for not a celebration, but a tragic search that most knew what the result would be. It was something that the community remembered for quite a long time. So these 3,000 men went out on their search. They formed a line east to west, traveling the countryside, scouring the hills. And it would be about an hour into that search that a dog named Rover would catch a scent. This was Mr. Curry's dog. Rover caught the scent and led them to what was known as Huckleberry Hill. Rover led them atop this granite hill that overlooked the countryside, and next to a boulder found the two girls wrapped up in each other, arms around each other. The older daughter, arms around the younger daughter, young Margaret's face pressed into young Jane Elizabeth's side. Jane Elizabeth had tried as best she could to kind of cloak her own dress over top of her sister's dress. What really got me after this story and the results in it was seeing the map afterwards. Shortly after the tragedy, a map was created, and the map shows the route that the children probably took. And what struck me was the distance that they traveled. And this is something that is well known now in search and rescue. People travel a lot farther than we think that they might when they're lost. You lose your bearings. It's thought that the children climbed atop this granite hill to try and find their bearings, see where they were. Now, nowadays, people might try to listen for cars and traffic and people, but this is a time when people traveled by horse and buggy. The railway system wouldn't even come through for at least another 10 years. So we're talking about scraggy wilderness, bogs, rivers, granite. It's not a friendly atmosphere. So they had traveled over 6 kilometers, about 3 miles through the wilderness. Now, it's most likely that they had found their way to this granite hill within the first couple of days, first day or two, and huddled next to this rock to spend the night. And unfortunately, the elements were too much and they succumbed to the elements. The girls were found atop this hill. The next day, they were transported to the Woodlawn Cemetery where, in pouring rain, they were interred. Today, you can still go to the cemetery and visit their graves. There's about a 4-foot white stone monument, and next to it is a tabletop-style monument with a brass plaque that was later installed by Mr. Curry, the gentleman who owned the dog that found the girls. He had been given a £5 sterling reward, and he used that reward to create this monument for the girls. If you were so adventurous as to take a hike to what was known as Huckleberry Hill and is now known as Melancholy Mountain, there is a cairn on top of that hill with a cross that had been recently rediscovered in about 2012 by some hikers. And next to that cairn, there is a stone with engravings from the other people who had made that trek in remembrance of those girls. Now, Dartmouth Heritage Museum, Evergreen House in particular, happens to be the former home of Helen Creighton, the nationally recognized folklorist. In her book, Songs and Ballads from Nova Scotia, she collected the folk tale of these girls who would become known as the Babes in the Mountain. This particular ballad is called Marr's Children. It was sung by Mr. Ben Henneberry on Devil's Island, one of the most well-known spots that Helen traveled to. The first verse reads as such: "Good people, read these verses which I have written here, and when you have perused them, You can but shed a tear. In 1844, April the 11th day, two little girls on Preston Road into the woods did stray. Their father and their mother both sick in bed did lay, when their two little children about the door did play. It was hand in hand together, they were seen to leave the door. The eldest was but 6 years old, the youngest only 4. O Jane Elizabeth Margaret Marr, was their right and proper name, yet two as fair a creature as nature ever framed. They walked along together, most cheerfully did play, but mark what followed after, how soon they lost their way. And that is the story of the Babes in the Woods. You can find their graves at Woodlawn Cemetery in Dartmouth. You can read more about their story in several collections. One that was written by a noted Dartmouth historian, J.P. Martin, The Babes in the Wood. He produced this pamphlet in about the 1940s. For whatever reason, this story tends to endure the test of time. People remember tragedies. People want to learn from the tragedies. Ground Search and Rescue has used cases of lost children to develop techniques to better find children more quickly in the woods, searching by grid pattern, as the members of the searching community did in the 1840s looking for these children. It was when they formed that east to west line that they were successful in locating those girls. It's a tragic tale that we can remember and learn from in times to come. So you can visit the Dartmouth Heritage Museum to learn more stories like this and happier ones as well. My favorite thing about museums is the stories that objects tell. When you look at a thing like a map, and often we look and try to orient our own home, but then when you look closely again, you start to ask questions. You wonder, oh, I wonder where that is. I wonder what that is now. What used to be here? And those are the stories that I love to share. Thank you.